Hey there, MRA, my Real Africanist. This is Marie Ya Jouf, the Real Africanist, and welcome to my channel. If you have been here before, thanks for coming back. And if this is your first time here, I appreciate you watching. On my channel, I talk about African history, the field of African studies, and current African affairs. So today, I wanted to talk about the United Nations General Assembly, right? And the fantastic job that African leaders did at this assembly, right? I just want to say that African leaders deserve to be congratulated on the awesome job that they did, right? They really need to be given their kudos. I'm saying that because lately, with everything that has been going on the African continent, many of us, including me sometimes, have been coming down hard on African leaders. African leaders have really been getting criticized and critiqued for the decisions that they have been making, which many of us believe as supporting the legacy of colonialism on the African continent, right? However, today, I just want to say that I believe many of the African leaders redeem themselves, right? I know that this, was just, to some, probably just another event where, leaders just gave glowing speeches and all of that sort of thing. But, I just saw, something different over the past week. When it comes to the intelligence and the stamina and the boldness of African leadership, right? Again, I thought all of their presentations were well articulated. I thought they were precise. I thought they were bold, and I thought they were right on point, right? I thought all of the leaders spoke with a sense of urgency and a unified voice, right? And I also believe that they put the world on notice that the time for change is right now, and that Africa is not the Africa that it used to be, right? And I just have to say it again that I am very, very proud of them. I am very proud of the way that they address the world, right? And so I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about a few leaders that I thought that did an extraordinary job. First of all, I thought that President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana did a great job, right? He started off his talks by saying that, I don't need any glowing or fancy words to say what I'm about to say, right? And basically, he talked about the hypocrisy of the United Nations, right? He talked about how this organization is known for talking about peace and and talking about democracy, but that they basically don't practice what they preach, right? He said that it was one of the most unfair organizations, right? That his that he has been a part of, right? He talked about the unfairness of the United Nations as it pertains to African nations, right? He talked about the dysfunctionality of the United Nations, and I think he hit that right on target, right? Again, he talked about the lack of uh, northern solidarity around the issues that are facing African nations at their northern borders, the issues that basically the Western nations helped to create, right? And how he believed that it was unfair for them not to help. Um, well, I won't say not to help, but to systematically address those issues in a progressive way. Actually, uh, with what they are doing, that it works, right? Because basically, they have all of these African countries have all of these UN peacekeeping initiatives and these other Western militaries stationed within their countries, who are supposedly there to fight terrorism and the issues that they have at the northern border, but it's not working, right? So he kind of talked about that. He talked about the African young people and how he wanted them to stay in Africa and not to be migrants risking their lives to go to Europe, right? But he's also was saying because of the development issues and because of the inability to provide jobs and provide the basic necessities for the young people, right, that they would risk their lives to go to other countries where they are not wanted, right? So again, I was very proud of President Addo, and I listened to him keenly as he talked about reparations, and he talked about the need for these Western nations to pay up, right? And basically, he said that, look, we as African nations, we take responsibility for the part that we played in the legacy of colonialism and enslavement. But uh, the Western nations, look, you have to admit that you are the ones who have benefited the most, and you have played the larger role, right? That you have taken the labor and the resources out of Africa for the last 400 to 500 years, right? And you have benefited substantially while African nations continue to suffer with undevelopment and with uh, being under-resourced, although we are the owners of the labor and the resource, right? So again, I thought he did a very, very good job at putting his point of view out there and basically saying to the West that, we are no dummies. We have to work with you. I believe in democracy. This is what I want for my country. This is the form of government that I want for my country. But look, you also need to pay up, right? Because we basically, um, work with you because, in other words, we really have no other choice because of the way everything is set up, and because of the historical consequences that have led to where we find ourselves in today, right? I mean, he mentioned the coups, but he did not go into any great details about the coup, but he also said that he understands really why they are happening, because he feel that the youth are disenchanted, and they believe that this is the way to go in order to get their needs met, right? So I respect him for that, right? I really do respect him for that. And also, I wanted to talk about President uh, Chakwera, I think Chakwera, and he's the president of Malawi, right? And so he talked about debt cancellation and the need for these Western nations to cancel the debt of these African countries, basically these IMF loans and these World Bank loans, right? And he talked about, how African nations were really on track and were really progressing before the onslaught of the coronavirus episode, as well as the war with Russia and Ukraine, right? And he talked about how both of those global events have set the African continent back, and um, has actually uh, uh, um, some of the gains that they have made have actually declined because of that, right? And he also, and one other thing that he talked about that I really didn't know anything about was the this cyclone, right? I guess this flood, this he called it Freddie. So I'm taking it was flood, a cyclone that wreaked so much havoc in his country, right? And I have to tell you, being here in the West, I don't remember hearing anything about it. Maybe it was on the news, maybe they talked about it. I have to go back and do some more research on it because I haven't. But he talked about how much destruction that it caused, how it just wiped out total communities and bridges and all type of infrastructure and all kind of agricultural crops, and how it destroyed like 80% of Malawi's grain, and all of those kind of things that this country is up against. And this is has been prevalent all across the African continent, right, for the past few years, and a lot of that has to do with these catastrophic climate episodes, right? Of which, Africa is not responsible for, right? I mean, even when President Addo was speaking, he talked about this sort of thing as well, but he also talked about $88 billion of illicit financial flows that illicit financials that flow out of African countries every year, right? So if you have $88 billion worth of illicit finances flowing out of Africa annually, plus you have these climate crises, plus you have this debt repayment, right? Then that really puts you in a very dire situation, right? And so when African leaders talk to African people like that, then they can better understand what is going on, and they don't leave them to their own opinions to make informed critiques about what is happening, right? Because again, we all only know so much, right? But then when African leaders don't speak to their people like they are intelligent enough to understand what is going on, then what you see in West Africa will continue to happen, right? And so I think communicating what is going on is a big part of getting these young people to understand what African leaders are up against, right? So I also wanted to mention President Ramaphosa of South Africa, right? So President Ramaphosa, uh, he talked about climate change, right? He talked about women's empowerment, right? He said that he had an all woman's delegation with him on the trip, which I thought was phenomenal, right? I think women's empowerment is a very important and timely issue that needs to be discussed. But I also feel like that uh, women empowerment was really, it was not a problem in Africa until, we started to take hold of the Western values and the Western ways and latch on to these Western uh, religious beliefs, right? These male dominated Western religions, right? Or these male chauvinist ways of doing things. And that's when this issue with women empowerment started to really be an issue, right? And even today, all across the diaspora, um, this Western way of approaching women has caused a number of problems in relationships between women and men of African descent, right? And so I truly believe when we denounce some of these Western ways and put them aside, then we will have a better chance of getting back to the basis and getting back to the organizational structures that work the best for our communities and for our societies, right? So, again, for President Ramaphosa, I know he's always getting criticized and critiqued, right? Because he's a part of the ANC and people feel like that's the old guard. But me, myself, I think he has a great understanding of politics on the global level. And, I do see some things that, well, I believe that he does well, right? And that's not to say that uh, that he doesn't do some things that I feel that are worth challenging, but I don't really think that he's all that bad. However, our brother Julius Malema in South Africa, he be letting them have it, right? But Julius Malema is a very powerful brother. He also, has a vision for his country, and he's more, closely related to the country, so he knows the insides and out. And again, he knows more than what we know. So it's worth listening to him and to think about some of the things that he is saying and how he believes that his leadership could take South Africa in a better direction for young African people, right? But back to Ramaphosa, he talked about the fate of the Palestinian people, and I'm very proud of South Africa for taking a stand on that issue and holding firm to their position on that, on how the Israelis are doing the Palestinian people, right? Um, like what's that? A female singer with Sinead O'Connor, like she said, nobody with a conscience or a heart could, approve of what's happening in that country and what's happening to the Palestinian people, right? So, like I say, I give President Ramaphosa props for talking about that and taking a stance against that suppression and brutality of the Palestinian people, right? So also he called for the lifting of sanctions against Zimbabwe. I can't believe that the United States is still sanctioning that country and probably other Western nations as well. They were under sanctions when President Mugabe was alive, and now they're under sanctions again for something else. And I think it still has to do with the land reform. Again, if you're not allowing these countries to dictate your actions and to run your country and to tell you what to do, then this is their way of bullying you into doing what they want you to do, right? Again, even when President Addo talked about reparations for Ghana, once before, President Museveni, who I respect a lot, but I disagree with him on this. He said that he wasn't really for reparations, right? And like I say, I totally disagree with him on that. But he gave a reason about the chiefs and how they were kind of involved and that they were weak and all of this kind of stuff. But there's a lot more to that I will go into on another video, but about who these chiefs were and how things happened the way they happened. I don't see it wasn't just as cut and dry, as President Museveni is making it to be. But I said that to say, now look at the way that the U.S. is going after him now that he refuses to budge on this whole LGBTQ legislation thing, right? But now they are trying everything in their powers to break him, right? To make him do what they want him to do. And and again, that's why I'm so proud of these African leaders, because at least they are standing up and saying, look, we have our own countries, we have sovereign nations, we have our laws, we have our customs, and they may not be what you want them to be, but they are ours, and we're not going to budge, and we're not going to continue to do what it is that you want us to do, and we're working on ways to sustain ourselves so we don't have to basically take your direction, right? So again, I just think, like I say, they did a great job. And again, when it comes to the different perspectives that African leaders share, like I was saying about President Museveni, and I'm quite sure, like I say, other leaders feel have some disagreements towards other African leaders, but I don't think that you should voice them so everyone can hear, and so especially not the Western world, because those are the things that they would use against you, and those are the things that they would try to use to divide and then conquer you. That's how they work. That's how they've always worked, and that's how they still work, right? But back to Ramaphosa, he talked, one other thing that I found, well, two other things I found interesting. One of them that he talked about the peace initiatives that him and the other, some other African leaders, when they went to Russia and Ukraine to talk to President Putin and President, is it Zelensky or Ulinsky, or, I always forget, but the president of Ukraine, when he was talking to them, and he was talking to them, about, trying to, stop the war and come to some type of peace agreement. But he said before the UN assembly that he had an opportunity to talk to the president of Ukraine, and he actually said that some of the peace initiatives that this African delegation had recommended were actually working, right? And they were actually starting to see some progress in those areas. So, that's a good thing, okay? And that's something that African leaders do not give credit for, right? I mean, I read an article once about this African delegation in Rwanda, right? And it was saying, talking about some type of a peace agreement that they were championing in Rwanda as well, and I had never heard that. So again, there's just so many things that we do not hear about African leaders. We hear all of the bad things, but we never hear any of the positive and progressive things. And that really should be our agenda, to really try to push the positive and progressive things that are happening on the continent, as well as what our leaders are doing, right? Again, we know that politics is a strange game, and most politicians are really in it for themselves. Um, but I will say that it appears that some of them, right, and I'm not saying all of them, because we always know that there's some that's always, in it to win it and in it for themselves. But there are some African leaders who genuinely have their people and their nation's concern at heart, right? But their hands are tied in so many ways, right? And so last, but not least, I'm with Ramaphosa. He talked about Africa's wealth belonging to Africa, right? And I thought that was a strong statement. He basically said, look, y'all been exploiting our resources and playing with us for too long. But Africa's wealth is for Africa. Our resources are for us first, and then we we will generously share with the world, what we have to share with you, at fair price. But basically, that's over with you just taking it all, and and we not getting our just doing what we need to support our people, right? Because he talked about the fact that some of these countries actually are already planning their future based upon African resources that are still in the ground, right? So again, I think he made a really bold statement about that. And he challenged some of these expectations from these Western nations, right? That expect to continue to be able to control the mineral resources and the mining sectors in Africa, right? And I also wanted to mention the president from Comoros, right? He even said some powerful things, right? But I think that he redeemed himself a little bit, right? Because I wasn't so happy with his overly emotional response at this G20 summit, right? A few weeks ago. I just thought he looked rather needy, right? And I just don't think that that's the posture that African leaders need to be giving out, especially with all of the stuff that they have been through and African nations have been through, right? I mean, the guy, the leader of the G20, who is the president of India, basically he had his hand out to shake the hand of the president of Comoros when he announced that, the AU was being allowed to join the G20, right? And so he had his hand out to shake hands with the president of Comoros, and then he just ran up and just hugged him. And I don't mean to laugh, because I don't mean to insult anybody, and I know to some a hug is not that big of a deal, especially in other cultures. Hugging is cool, but I just thought it was a little bit overkill, me myself. Again, I thought it was just so needy, because I just didn't see the big deal, about belonging to this whole G20 group, and why, like I say, some African leaders are just so, just so desirous of wanting to be, a part of these global groups that have shunned them all throughout history. Basically like President Addo was saying about the UN. These groups have shunned you, have ignored you. But now when you basically have decided to concentrate on your own continent, to form this African Continental Free Trade Agreement to put some of the countries participating in this or joining this whole BRICS thing, and just deciding to do other things to take, again, your destiny in your own hands. Then now all of a sudden, hey, you welcome here. You can join this group. You can join this group. When these nations are just afraid of losing the stronghold and the influence that they have had over African countries, right, in the past. And so now all of a sudden they want to, accept you into their groups. And it's nothing but posturing, right? Because you know that you're going to be marginalized as always, and that they say that they accept you, but it's just all talk. So anyway, again, like I say, he said some powerful things, so I did want to mention him too, and just to say that he kind of redeemed himself, right? And of course, Prime Minister Motley of Barbados, she was strong as ever. She's a very powerful sister. And she talked about, mostly she talked about climate change and how it has really impacted the countries, what she calls in the global south, right? And the poor, the less developed nations of the world, and how Africa has the least carbon footprint, but they have been paying out the most, right, to try to prevent these climate catastrophes from just destroying the country, right? And then also spending money out to fix problems that have been caused by these climate incidents, right? So she really went in strong about that, and basically saying how unfair it was, and that how these other wealthier nations are not pulling their weight, and that basically these the lesser developed countries cannot continue to put this kind of money out there, because at this rate they just will not survive, right? And they basically say they're just not willing to do that anymore, right? And that it's the the capitalist systems and the industrial systems, basically, that is just causing all of this again, a carbon footprint in the world and around the globe. And again, they're not doing what they say they were going to do to help prevent it. And they also are not paying their fair share, right? Again, President Addo, he mentioned, I think he said it was 1 billion dollars that they had promised, and they haven't delivered on it yet, right? But last but not least, so let me hurry up so I can wrap this up. Let's talk about the president of Guinea, right? I think he was the granddaddy of them all, okay? President Mamadi Doumbouya, I think I'm saying that right. He was just extraordinary. He was very powerful, right? And not to mention that the brother is not bad on the eyes. Just a very strong black fine brother, may I admit, right? And it's good. Black women are proud to see our brothers up there standing strong and looking good, like I know you would, right? But anyway, he did an extraordinary job of basically laying everything on the line, and just basically saying that Africa is tired, exhausted, just from years of, like you say, of exploitation, of suppression, of subjugation, and all the above, right? And I have to say that is that could be applied to African diaspora communities as well. Just we are basically tired. We have been fighting for years. Our ancestors were fighting. We're still fighting, right? Fighting against enslavement, fighting against colonization, fighting against discrimination, racism. I mean, you name it. We've been fighting against it and fighting for it, for the right to vote, fighting for good health care, for good schools, quality schools, for strong neighborhoods, for access to capital, for business. I mean, everything that you can think of, fighting against police brutality. I mean, you name it. Like I said, we've been fighting, and I call it battle fatigue, right? I heard um, one lady used that term years ago, and she was from I forget which country in Africa she was from, but we was at a conference. We were at a conference. I will never forget it. And she used that term, and it just stuck with me. She says, "Battle fatigue. We're just tired of fighting," right? And that was the sentiments of President Doumbouya of Guinea, right? He just said, "Africa's tired." And we're exhausted, right? And the era of the old Africa is over. So you basically better recognize, right? He said you better recognize that 70% of Africans or young Africans who are free, who are open-minded and ready to take their destiny in their own hands, right? He told them basically, we're not anti-anything, right? We're not anti-America, UK, Russia, Turkey, you name it. We're not anti, but now we are pro-African. And you better listen up, because that's the way it is, right? And you think there's a lot of coups now, there's more to come, and basically he says that this whole push for democracy, they're tired of it. They're tired of the world trying to fit Africa into their expectations and into their bubble, right? And he says that, he's not opposed to the democratic system of government, but basically it does not work for Africa, and it has been a failure. Right. And he said he realized he's going to get pushback from a lot of, African leaders and people around the world who, would say that, oh, here's another dictator. But basically, when the Western world, you are the ones that's the dictators. You want to dictate to everybody how they need to run their countries, rule their countries, and, do whatever that they need to do. But going by your rules. And he basically said no more. That's not going to happen no more. That time is over, right? We are a new Africa. And he said he understood, though. Other thing that I thought was very humbling of him, he said now that he's the leader and he's in position of leadership, now he can really understand what African leaders are up against, the pressure that they are under, and the reasons why they fold, and the reasons why they just choose to go ahead and do what these Western nations and countries tell them to do because of the tactics that they use, right? And again, I just thought that was so powerful, right? I thought that was so very powerful. I'm going to do a video that I'm going to put up, after this video, but I'm going to have to go and revisit that video, because there were some things that, I was going to say, but after, like I say, after these presentations by these African leaders, I have to revisit it, right? Because even with the situation with Guinea, I thought it was strange that, just last week, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, they signed this regional military alliance, right? Agreement. And I thought it was strange that Guinea didn't sign it, because it initially was Guinea, Mali, and Burkina Faso in talks to sign this type of agreement for trade and security in the region. And then that never happened. And then with President Doumbouya going to America for this UN summit. I was reading somewhere about his house and property in the United States and all of this kind of stuff. And I kind of thought it was odd for, the United States to, allow him to come into the country, but they so much against this coup, right? And then he has property there and all of this kind of stuff. Now, I wasn't saying that, he was on the side of America. I mean, I really didn't know, right? I don't know a lot about him, right? But I was wondering, right? Because again, you never know whose side who is on. But in this particular case, and like I say, after the presentation and the strong and powerful words that he said, I mean, I doubt it. I think this guy is on the up and up, and I'm hoping that he is, right? Because these are the kind of leaders that Africa needs to move forward, right? And so I think that's it. I'm going to get off of here. And if you want to check out all of these speeches, go over to Swahili Nation's YouTube channel, right? He has all of the speeches over there. He did a really good job of, getting them all and getting them together. So if you want to, expand on what I was saying here, then that's a good place to go and listen to the speeches for yourself, right? And so I thank you all for listening. I know I went kind of long today, but I really appreciate you staying with me if you are here, right? And don't forget to like, right? Get those likes up. Come on, push that like button, share, and subscribe, especially if you are getting some value out of the content, right? And also comment. Tell me what you think. Do you believe what the African leaders were saying? Do you think it's all just talk? Or do what they were saying, does it give you some more insight into what the leaders are up against, right? And does it give you some type of hope for the future because of the unified stand that they seem to have taken at this UN assembly, right? So again, I am Marie Ya Jouf, the Real Africanist, and thank you again for watching. Don't forget, fight the power. When you're researching about Africa, always go deeper because there's always more to the story. And never forget the ancestors. Peace, and I'll talk to you soon.